Here's what we're watching today. The federal government is shut down. And for most Americans, that means a lot of noise in Washington, a lot of uncertainty for workers, and a lot of questions about what comes next. What's different this time is the way the White House is talking about the shutdown. Vice President J.D. Vance told reporters that if this drags on, permanent layoffs are likely. His phrase was very soon. That's not the normal furlough and back pay pattern we've seen in past shutdowns. It's a signal that workforce cuts aren't just possible. They're part of the plan if Congress doesn't fund the government. Unions pushed back instantly. The American Federation of Government Employees and several allied groups filed legal actions arguing that you can't use a shutdown, a lapse in appropriations, not a performance issue, to summarily fire career civil servants. Their position, reductions in force, still have rules, and a shutdown doesn't erase them. That legal friction started moving in real time today. At the same time, there are concrete signs that some agencies are already trimming. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, funded largely by its own fees, not annual appropriations, circulated a letter saying it will cut around 1% of its staff and close a regional office. That's not a rumor, that's a memo. Now, 1% at a single agency is not the whole federal workforce, but it's a data point on the board while the shutdown clock is ticking. Let's connect that to the bigger legal backdrop from earlier this year. Because this isn't a one-off moment. Back in July, the Supreme Court intervened in a case brought by federal unions to pause an executive branch downsizing plan. The lower court had blocked the plan. The Supreme Court issued a stay, essentially lifting that block, which allowed agencies to resume layoffs while the litigation continues. That doesn't settle the case permanently, but it greenlights the policy in the near term. The upshot? Legal authority, at least for now, tilted toward the administration's ability to reduce headcount. So tonight's question is not just, will there be layoffs during the shutdown? It's, are these two storylines, today's shutdown rhetoric and July's Supreme Court order, actually chapters in the same book? Let's walk it through, carefully and without taking sides. First, the mechanics. In a normal shutdown, agencies separate employees into accepted, they keep working, and non-accepted, they're furloughed. Historically, when funding returns, those furloughed workers come back and receive back pay under federal law. Layoffs, permanent separations, are typically handled through reduction in force procedures, notice periods, retention registers, bump and retreat rights, and sometimes priority placement or severance. Shutdowns have been painful, but they haven't historically been a backdoor to mass permanent firings. That's why the administration's message, layoffs very soon, landed like a thunderclap across the federal workforce press corps. Second, the policy posture. For months, we've seen public talk of downsizing as a governing goal, consolidating or closing offices, pausing, or canceling funding lines viewed as non-essential or misaligned with administration priorities, and pursuing headcount cuts even outside of the annual budget process. You can agree or disagree with that strategy, but it's been stated out loud. Government-focused outlets captured it before the shutdown. And today, those same outlets are reporting that layoffs are just days away. Again, not proof of any specific number, just a consistent through line in the messaging. Third, the legal turning point. The union's lawsuits earlier in the year secured a preliminary pause from a lower court. The administration appealed to the Supreme Court, and on July 8th, the court granted the administration's request for a stay, freeing agencies to resume reductions while the case proceeds. Justice Jackson dissented from that stay, warning about separation of powers concerns and Congress's role in structuring the civil service. But the practical effect was immediate. Agencies regained latitude to cut. That's the hinge that makes today's shutdown rhetoric more than a bluff. There's recent Supreme Court paper behind it. Fourth, today's on-the-ground developments. We've got the Time report quoting the Vice President warning of permanent layoffs if the impasse continues. We've got Federal News Network noting the White House expects layoffs very soon, while also pointing out the many unknowns. Which agencies, how fast, and under what procedures? We've got unions filing suit specifically targeting shutdown-linked firing plans. And we've got a major, fee-funded agency, USPTO, already moving with a modest but real cut. Individually, none of these proves a government-wide strategy. Together, they form a pattern consistent with the summer's legal green light. Let's be crystal clear on the two claims in circulation and what the record supports. Claim 1. The administration tried to lay off federal workers earlier in 2025, and the Supreme Court denied it. That's not how the docket reads. In reality, a lower court pause initially blocked the mass layoff plan. The administration asked the Supreme Court to intervene, and the Supreme Court allowed the plan to move forward, pending appeal. In plainer English, the court didn't deny the plan. It cleared the way, at least temporarily. That nuance matters for anyone trying to track what is and isn't legally authorized right now. Claim 2. The administration is planning layoffs during the shutdown. There are explicit statements to that effect, warnings from the White House and the Vice President, plus agency-level moves. Whether those layoffs are legal in a shutdown context is exactly what unions are challenging. Experts at think tanks on the left argue that shutdowns constrain firing authority, which is why, in their view, the administration is trying to move quickly before procedural guardrails fully lock in. That's an argument, not a ruling, but it's part of the expert conversation. Now let's talk incentives and strategy. If your governing objective is to shrink the federal footprint, you have a few levers: budget cuts through Congress, agency reorganizations, attrition and hiring freezes, performance-based removals, and RIFs. Shutdowns introduce a political window where agencies reassess what's essential, mothball programs that are paused anyway, and then, potentially, do not bring those functions and the jobs back. Pair that with a Supreme Court stay that has already lifted a block on reductions, and the playbook becomes easier to read. The legal door is open wider than it was in the spring, and the shutdown creates a moment to walk through it. Again, that's the structural analysis, not an endorsement. What are the counter-arguments? First, process. RIFs have rules. Agencies can't just declare layoffs by Friday and skip merit principles. There are retention registers, veterans' preference rules, and notice requirements. Unions will argue that trying to short-circuit those during a shutdown is unlawful and will ask courts for immediate relief. Second, mission risk. Critics warn that fast, large-scale cuts, especially in specialized agencies, can hollow out expertise that is time-consuming to rebuild. Third, politics. If the public associates workforce cuts with travel delays, benefit backlogs, or safety lapses, the backlash can erase any budget savings. Those are not abstractions. They're the classic costs in any downsizing debate. On the other side, proponents will say three things. 1. The federal government is too big and too slow, and that size calcifies bureaucracy. 2. Courts have now recognized broader executive latitude to manage the workforce, at least for now, so leadership should use it to align agencies with current policy priorities. 3. Some services can be delivered with fewer people through technology, consolidation, and reprioritization. Whether you agree with that is a policy question. The point is that the legal environment since July makes that agenda more actionable. Let's circle back to the dotted line you asked us to draw, carefully. Start at point A, an administration with a stated interest in downsizing. Move to point B, a summer Supreme Court stay, lifting a block on that agenda, restoring maneuvering room. Now hit point C, today's shutdown, framed by the White House not as a pause button, but as a point of leverage, layoffs very soon. Finally, add point D, concrete early moves at agencies like USPTO. When you connect those points, you do get a line that implies more than coincidence. It suggests a coordinated policy direction, one way or another, through litigation wins, budget standoffs, or agency-level decisions. The federal footprint is intended to be smaller on the other side of this fight. That's the neutral read of the facts in sequence. What should viewers watch next? Three things. First, the courts. Again, do unions secure emergency relief specifically against shutdown-linked rifts? If a judge draws a bright line between being out of funding and being fired, that will slow the momentum. If courts decline to intervene, expect faster agency timetables. Second, the agencies. Which ones move first, beyond USPTO? Fee-funded operations, where the revenue picture is clearer, may be the path of least resistance. But the bigger question is whether large cabinet departments announce structured RIF plans, not just contingency memos, but dates and numbers. The trade press will spot it quickly. Third, Congress. A funding deal could change the calculus overnight, especially if it includes headcount language or buyout authorities. Alternatively, a long shutdown hardens choices. Programs paused for weeks are easier to argue down for good. Keep an eye on live updates from major outlets for any spending framework that includes workforce provisions. Bottom line, if your theory is that one way or another, shrinking government is part of the plan, the available evidence supports that this is a live objective, legally enabled in July and operationally advanced during the shutdown narrative now. Whether it succeeds depends on courts, agency execution, and how the public experiences the trade-offs. As always, we're not taking a side, we're tracking the facts. If you work in the federal sector, keep your documentation current, watch for official notices, and follow your agency's HR bulletins. And for everyone else, expect this debate to shape not just Washington payrolls, but the speed and scope of services you interact with every day, from benefits processing to patents to inspections. If you found this helpful, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next update. Thanks for watching.